Welcome to Season 5 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast, presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking with wellbeing experts who can help you to stay well as you plan your exit. If you're almost ready to leave and you need to redo your resume, check out my Resume Revamp digital download. It's a comprehensive guide to making your resume show off your assets. For $49.95 Australian dollars, you'll get pre-filled, eye-pleasing resume and cover letter templates in both US letter and A4 size, a lexicon of teacher terminology with a translation to corporate speak, and a bonus PDF on getting past applicant tracking software. Check out the Resume Revamp package on the product page of larksong.com.au and come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Episode 4. Hi everyone, welcome to the show. On today's show, I'm very pleased to be introducing to you Adam Voigt, who is the founder and CEO of Real Schools, which is an organisation that partners with schools to help everyone in the school, all the stakeholders, to flourish. So thanks for coming on the show today, Adam.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, Adam, before we kind of dig into how do we make schools better places for everybody, what's your background? How did you get into this space where you're working now?
Yeah, so I'm a teacher and did my first year of teaching was back in the graduated in Victoria into the Jeff Kennett years, where a lot of schools closing, so it wasn't easy to get a job. But I'd done my last year of teaching in my last teaching round with Monash University in Alice Springs, and so they sort of kept us on the books there and offered us a job. So I did my first year on an Aboriginal community called Ali Karung, about 400 kilometres north of Alice. Came back to Victoria, worked in special education, worked in primary education, and then went back to the territory into school leadership and spent 2 substantive principal positions up in Darwin, and then founded Real Schools in 2012 and returned to Melbourne a year after we did that, and been here ever since. But we work with schools all over the country, so it's been a fast and a rapidly changing career, and continues to be so.
So when you just because a lot of people are in that transitional phase when they're listening to this podcast, as you were starting up the business, were you? Is it a not-for-profit?
No,
we're a for-profit. Okay,
we're an education business.
Yeah. Okay. So as you were doing that, were you still working as a teacher?
No, I was a principal, and so of quite a large government primary school up in Darwin. So I had 2 substantive principal roles. One was it was kind of a turnaround job, I suppose, on a really challenging inner city school that catered for kids with enormous disadvantage. And then I was asked to the Northern Territory government was opening a brand new large urban primary school, and I was asked to be the principal of that school. So I was the inaugural principal there. It was really incredible, exciting work, and I made that big, scary, nasty leap to resign. And to seek a different way of working and seek a different way of kind of, I guess, trying to influence in a way that allowed me to stay in my passion for teaching and school leadership.
And so how long were you the principal at the second school?
2 years.
Yeah. Okay. And then were you still in Darwin when you started the business?
We were. We thought my daughter was actually in year 6 at the time, and so we thought it might be a nice marker for her to let her finish her primary years. We'd been in Darwin for 9 years, and we sort of were starting to get to a point where the kids were having to teach the kids on the way back at Christmas who their aunties were.
Right.
And so we figured it was time to get them back to family. And so we traversed the country again and resettled in Melbourne.
Right. Okay. And so now you're back in Melbourne and you've been running this business now for A fair while.
About 9 years now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what does a day in the life of Adam Voigt look like?
Yeah, it's well, we're growing really rapidly. So my role's changing. When I first started, I was the one who was doing a lot of the work directly with schools, but now every school that we partner with, we put somebody with that school for a 3-year journey, and they provide a lot of the training, and they work in classrooms with teachers. They engage parents, they mentor the leaders, they coach, they provide resources. So I do a lot of work now on finding people who would be really credible partners for schools. Do a lot of work speaking and writing about this work, publishing books and things like that that can hopefully help teachers with the stuff that matters most. So I'm learning a lot as I go, making a lot of mistakes as I go. So it feels like starting and teaching all over again. But it's exciting work, and we're reaching more and more schools and helping more and more teachers, and that's always been the aim.
And how many people are on your team?
There's about 8 of us now. So, and that includes the we call expert facilitators, who are our former principals. We won't put anyone with a school who hasn't been a principal and a successful teacher. And so there's them, and there's an administrative side to the business that I don't like to have to do. I prefer to have people who know what they're doing on that side of it. But they're an incredible team, and what they've been able to do in continuing to help and to serve our schools over the last, over the stretch of the pandemic, I'm really proud of them. Yeah.
Awesome. And so how do schools actually find you?
Yeah, so realschools.com.au is the website, and they'll be able to see the kind of work we do. Our focus is what we call school culture partnerships, but they'll be able to see a lot of other ways that they can engage with us as well. So we help schools around the leadership of the culture. Everybody tells us that school culture matters, that it's really important. And then when we ask them to tell us what it is, they get nervous and turn into that great Australian character, Dennis Denuto from The Castle, who's asked to describe the Constitution, and it's the vibe. And, I always make the point that if culture is that important, but we don't know what it is, how do we work on it? And so we help schools to be able to identify what that is and to be able to focus in on it. And that's really cool for us, because for us, that means that teachers and school leaders in all the schools we're working in are working on the stuff that is their purpose. This stuff of building a culture where kids, where staff members, where parents can thrive. That's the stuff that we got in it for. So helping them focus back on that and out of the stuff that doesn't matter. That's good work. Yeah.
That's great. So how does the school know that it's time to give you a ring? Like, what's the catalyst for that phone call?
We often laugh that we get 2 kinds of schools. We get schools where it's not working. Where the student conduct, for instance, might be a real problem in the school, where parents and the staff of the school are maybe at loggerheads and not getting along, and there's just too much conflict, or there's no way of resolving that conflict. So we get schools that are doing it tough, and we get schools who we often end up sort of metaphorically at a point where we discover that they're going okay, but they're on autopilot, and there's a new level of not only achievement and progress, but of kind of satisfaction that they can get to in their work if they're able to say, okay, there are some practices, there are some habits and traditions in our school that aren't serving us anymore. Let's identify what they are, and let's bring in an explicit practice framework that will allow us to kind of enact that. And that's where a lot of our work around practicing restoratively comes in. I wrote a book on it called Restoring Teaching. And this model that we call RP 2.0, which is about helping people get their language right, get their conduct right, get their mindset right. And if we do that, we get some incredible stories and results from our partner schools that we're really proud of.
So without naming names, can you give me an example of a situation that might call for that kind of those conversations? So
I guess one example might be there's a school that's not too far from us here in Melbourne. That's a pretty tough little corner of the world. And that was indicated when we started working together that they were in the top 5% of the state for suspensions and for suspendable incidents. We've worked together with them over a 5-year period. And in that time, we've now taken them out of that 5% bracket and into the opposite 25%.
Wow, that's impressive.
And we're incredibly proud of that. And the thing that kind of happens, and a lot of teachers are under pressure these days, and a lot of school leaders are too, around, for instance, NAPLAN results. We don't come into schools and focus on NAPLAN results. We focus on creating a culture where people can thrive, and what are the practices and strategies that help us to do that. So we don't focus on that. But in this school, when we got that right, NAPLAN results went through the roof.
Right. So just for the international audience, that's the local sort of testing regime for
standardized tests. That's mandated across the country. Yeah.
Okay. So what causes a school to pick up the phone? What is it that they've got? Is it always behavior? Is there other things?
No, sometimes it's just that and a lot of schools will talk to us about students who are breezing through, or staff members who are using patterns that kind of don't line up with their values. A lot of schools these days are big on espousing values, which is probably another rabbit hole we could go down about whether that's just kind of a bit of corporate, marketing, really. But if you're going to say that we value student engagement, but then we still have a teacher at the front of the room who's in an authoritarian position, trying to rely heavily on knowledge transfer and kind of using their power to get a kid to get through the curriculum. Schools find themselves kind of saying these things and going, hang on, that's not really what we believe. That's not really what we believe engagement's like. That's not really what we believe responsibility or achievement is really all about. And so when they realise there's a gap between what they say they want and what they're actually doing, they say, we wouldn't mind filling that gap. And that's where, for us, this restorative approach, which has been used in schools for decades now, but we've said that using it as just a response to when kids do the wrong thing is just the tiniest, narrowest wedge of what's possible. When you allow those principles to reach your instructional model in the classroom. And we always say that the two benefits that teachers get out of working with us is that their work is more effective, in that kids make better progress academically and socially in their presence. And the second thing is that they're less stressed. Right. And chiefly that is because, and we contend that a lot of what stresses teachers is they go home kind of with a hunch that what they were doing that day doesn't match what they believe about working with young people. But when they can go home every day going, you know what, I believe about empowering young people, inspiring young people, engaging young people. I believe in advocating for them, stepping into taking risks in their learning and celebrating success. When they can go home every day and go, yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't hamstrung by all the other things that I thought I had to do. Then that's that's a really good thing.
Yeah, and very satisfying too for everybody, for the students who engaged in their learning and knowing that the teachers aligned with themselves, and really nice. So how do schools actually fund your service? How do they pay for this? Because this does not sound like something the Department of Education is going to spring for.
No, it's not. Sometimes we work directly with departments and with regions who decide that they're going to, work with us as a group and to find different streams. Some schools pay for it out of their professional learning budget, and they just say, well, it's time. This is the stuff that we should have attended to, and we are certainly finding, these days as we sort of emerge from a pandemic, that a lot of schools are saying this is the work that we should have been doing all along. We were being distracted by other priorities that we thought were priorities. But it's people stuff. And so we find a lot of schools now that are just saying, you know what, this is a priority. The culture of our school is a priority. The way that people treat each other in our school is a priority. So most of our work is with schools who have made the conduct and culture and the connection and the relationship piece a priority, and have made that priority beyond kind of a program approach, that says we'll teach respect on a Wednesday afternoon, but we're not really going to, do much about people actually treating each other more respectfully.
Yep, definitely encountered that system. Okay, so imagine then that I'm a teacher and I'm feeling under pressure and I'm feeling that misalignment between my values and priorities in the classroom and what I'm being expected to do by the school for whatever reason, doesn't matter why, just there's a disconnect. How do I, as a, somewhere way down the pecking order, how do I go about creating change?
So we think that that's the best way that change happens is when it happens at that end of the pecking order. So a grassroots, we're kind of after not only just within a school, but across schools, a grassroots kind of revolution. So we're talking about, for us, we talk about, school, we want schools, schools go, how can we spread this further when they get a great result? We say what we need to do is to make it, popular across your entire region so that a local member wants to claim credit for it. And it's like that in a school as well. We want a handful of teachers, a couple of teachers, to get such enormous benefit out of this that a school leader goes, we need everyone to have this. So we talk to, one thing is the language that needs to change, and we speak specifically to what we call affective language. So that's affect, not effect. And so affective language, the best example I can give you of that is that for a teacher who sees a student who drops a piece of rubbish, and we all say it's a low-level behaviour, it's not a big deal, but it's something we'd like to address. And we all have defaults around that. And the most likely default that most of us have is something along the lines of, hey, pick that up. But we say instead, what we need to do is just adjust it slightly and say, disappoints me to see you do that, put it in the bin.
Right, so you're still giving the command, but you're adding in the sort of the value judgment, I guess.
Yeah, and what it does is it provides this young person, it does two things for educators. One, when you enact that word, that disappoint word, it enacts two key componentry within the brain. So it's your neocortex, which is your language center, and also your limbic system, which is where the emotions come from. So there's quite deep learning happening there when you're using that much of your brain. So it actually increases slightly, sort of tilts the odds in the favor of the kid picking up the rubbish. Right. The second thing it does is it allows that student it actually seizes for the teacher a teaching moment. So it gives a student a piece of information, it's knowledge, that if I do things like that, it affects people this way. And that arms them better to be able to navigate a social system.
Yes.
Because you can tell kids that when you see a kid put a piece of rubbish in the bin, you can say, delights me to see you do that. Thank you. And they got all of this information then that allows them to kind of do what we would say is higher order thinking. You can predict. So you find kids in schools kind of the result of making this language commitment, which seems so small, but there's hundreds of opportunities every day.
So they're just two words, it's disappointed and delighted.
It's tiny, it's nothing, it costs teachers no time. But all our teachers tell us they see a ridiculous response of kids who kind of look at them funny, like, what? And they then have these opportunities, and what they tell us they see as kids, they can sort of watch them and they're about to drop that piece of rubbish. They have a moment that teachers almost would miss, where a kid just has a little moment between impulse and action, that's called thought, and it's built, that thought is reflection of a little bit of growing empathy, and have a little moment where a kid goes, probably shouldn't. And that's what we're looking for. Now, we don't need kids to build posters about empathy. We don't need them to conduct online mini lessons about respect. We need to show them all the little behaviors that kind of comprise that. And when you can say to a young person, delighted to see you put the rubbish in the bin, that's responsibility.
Nice. I love that.
We work up to those values rather than making a mural out of responsibility and hoping that it's going to trickle down onto people as they walk past. It doesn't work.
And especially when it's not reflected in the rest of the school culture. Like if you're asking, say you've got a value of honesty, and then the the business manager lies to you about why you can't go on your professional development training or something. I'm trying to find a neutral example that did never happen to me so that I can use it. But
it is like that, though. You're absolutely right.
And you're like, well, this honesty should be everywhere in the environment.
What does it mean if we say we do it? The most common value in all of Australia's schools is respect. Yet every time I sit in a room full of teachers and ask them, put your hand up if you think we've got an issue with respect in Australian schools, they'll put their hand up.
I would say I could put my hand up for the whole world, because this is the conversations that I have regularly with teachers, that's one of the big things they feel is a lack of respect.
A
lack of respect for their profession, for them personally, for the way
they're for us treated. To look at each other and say, it's not working. It's not working. Formalizing respect isn't working. You've got to bring it right back to this low behavioral level. Why? Because of the ridiculous volume of opportunities that we're presented to provide that information for kids. That's how neither of us grew up respectful because we were put through a mini lesson or because mum and dad sat us down and gave us the respect talk. It wasn't formal. It wasn't event-based. It's cultural.
And there was behaviors that were just expected as well. I mean, I know, I'm showing my age right now, but my great aunt used to get on the bus and say, thank you, driver, and thank you to the shopkeeper when you left the shop. Even if you didn't buy anything, just say thank you for letting me in. It was a very different way of being, I think. It's
a fabulous example. It makes respect behavioural. That's what.
So I'm thinking now, early childhood must be an opportunity to get in at the ground floor for this.
It's incredible. I work with some with some of our primary schools who, with this language, and this is just one part of it, is the language. Have done some amazing things with this. I work with a group of teachers in one primary school who their early childhood PLC decided that this language was their focus. And every week they would teach the kids a new affective word. So just a new feelings word. Because what we find is that we've got secondary kids who think that the only way they can impact people is they make people happy, sad or angry. That's all the emotional vocab they've got. And they decided that they would teach the kids a new effective word every week, effective word of the week, and then they would try and use it as much as they could. And they said, what do you think we'll get? And I said, well, I've got this running theory that a strong emotional vocab, married with a growing emotional intelligence, that's what creates creativity. They're creative people. And I went back to their PLC at the end of the year for their presentations, and they gave me like a little frame, a piece of writing from one of their 5-year-old girls, and it was about the story was a narrative. It was about a worm on the driveway, and the worm on the driveway had been half run over by mum's car, and there it was in the writing. It said, and the worm was perturbed. Well, I had a good chuckle, like you, and then we had a little moment where we went, there it is. There it is, a young person demonstrating creativity because they've got these words available to them. I've got another year 2 teacher who was frustrated that her students, particularly her male students, went from 0 to angry too quickly. They think it's binary. I think you're either angry or you're not. And so she was teaching them all the words back from angry to 0. The different degrees of anger. And by the time I got to her class, she was teaching them the word for the smallest possible amount of anger you can feel. Do you reckon you can get it? What do you reckon is the word for the smallest possible?
Like annoyed, maybe?
Yeah, she'd already done that. She'd done frustrated.
That was further along. What's the very first thing?
Exactly.
Go on, you'll have to tell me.
Yeah, she's teaching her students how you get miffed.
I love it.
Okay. And I walked up to a year 2 boy and said, how do you get miffed? And he said, it's like this. He goes, someone drops your pen, walks past your table and knocks a pen on the ground. He goes, you just look at it and you go, but I'll be all right.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I love it. Miffed. I wouldn't have, so I don't use that word.
We talked about it. How much does that change the life of, say, the year 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 teachers that these boys have later in life? If at year 2, they learn that you do not need to go to rage.
Yeah, for something like that.
I've got a word for it. I've got language that I can say to myself or out loud, and I've got a behavior that runs with it.
It's so powerful, isn't it? The language that we use, the way it informs our emotional understanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
And all
So,
the research around culture is that language is the driver.
right, really
Yeah, we don't
interesting.
talk about the way we speak enough in schools. Yeah.
I used to insist that they'd say, they come up to me. I was teaching performing and visual arts in a primary school, but secondary trained. So I only
Yep.
taught art
Yep.
and drama and music. Anyway, so those subjects. But the students will come up to me and say, "Can I go toilet?" And I'd say, take a deep breath. May I please go to the toilet?
Yeah.
And so every child would say to their own teacher, "Can I go toilet?" But to me, they would say, "Excuse me, Mrs. Diakos, may I please go to the toilet?" And I go, "Yes, if you ask me like that, you can go wherever you like."
Yeah, it's right.
It is nice. It's delightful when someone speaks to you that way. You're absolutely right. I love that.
And for us to be able to let kids know when you speak to me like that, you're showing me respect and thank you. They start to build this kind of really practical working understanding of what it means to respect people.
And then it carries over into every other facet of life, doesn't it? Because then you can say thank you to the shopkeeper or the whoever helps you, or
the people that understand the way that people work and how to make people around them feel good in their presence. They're the successful ones.
Yeah, it's so true.
So we're going to set our kids up to have those opportunities. Yeah.
So you talked about, Adam, the various stakeholders, and there are lots of stakeholders in schools. It's students, parents, the teaching staff, the admin staff, and then there's the next level up and the levels above. There are loads of stakeholders. How do you keep everyone happy?
Yeah, we kind of have a bit of a working model for this, where we talk to the three key stakeholder groups. So we talk about teachers, but we say really what we're talking about is every grown-up who's in the school.
Right.
And we say what we need those people to be is committed. So we talk about committed teachers. But we point out that way too much and for way too long, we've used the wrong rulers to measure teacher commitment. We've talked about time and effort. And my experience is that there is no school in Australia that I've worked with where I would walk away and say, the problem is these people aren't trying hard enough or long enough. It's not the case. It's just not true. A genuinely committed teacher is one who has the opportunity, because the school leaders have provided it, to regularly get into conversations about practice, the stuff that matters when you're a teacher. And that they're given frames to be able to say, this is kind of what we believe is the right practice for our school, and that builds the best relationships, and that they're provided with a safe place to be able to make changes. Be able to say that way of speaking, that way of teaching, that way of resolving conflict, that way of dealing with poor choices isn't serving me, and we need to let it go. Whereas teachers, we're not very good at that, if we're really honest. We're not very good at being able to say that the work I've been doing is not my best work. We're not very good at being able to thank it for being the best that we could do at the time, and adopting new practices, because somehow we kind of feel shame attached to abandoning something that we'd maybe been doing for 25 years. So really committed teachers step into being unfinished. There's always something I can do a little bit better. I'm prepared to change. That's all it is. We talk about caring students. That's the second sort of stakeholder group, is the students. And the caring piece for us is about elevating that empathy, not because it's soft and fluffy, because it allows kids to think before they act. This is that little wedge between impulse and action where they might go, nah, probably shouldn't. And then we talked about connected communities. So that's about our parent and our carer communities, and bringing them back into alignment in both our conduct and our vision with the school. And I think one of the saddest things that's happened to schools over the last 30 years is that, and this will sound wrong when I first say it, but 30 years ago, what was really different about our schools was that 30 years ago, if you got into trouble at school, you got into trouble twice. And it wasn't about the trouble. It was about the trust. It's that parents and schools were really clear on what they were doing, and they were doing it together. And they've been driven apart, not because either group chose it. It's a media-driven phenomena where we play only stories of things that have gone wrong. We emphasize only things that have gone wrong, and we celebrate when someone takes on the other, and wins. And that's why we don't see any news stories about how this primary school and this parent group are getting on really well and doing a fantastic thing for their community. We just see when they're in conflict over school uniform or over, what's in the canteen, or,
insert issue here. Yeah.
Absurd, that have nothing to do with great teaching and learning or turning these kids into fabulous citizens, which is still what parents send their kids to school for. And so we need to get back on the same page about that.
Just on that topic, should parents be sending their kids to school in order for them to become fabulous citizens?
I think most schools are hoping when they send their kids to school that when there's like a slide when we run our parent engagement sessions where we put 1 and 2 up on the slide and we say, you could hold the school responsible for so many things, but if I could only let you have 2, what are you after? And this comes back universally. They say, we want you to do the learning bit. They want to trust us to be experts in education. And then the second bit, they talk about social skills or cooperation or getting along with other people. And I say, what about the heading we put over that is citizen building? But and this is the bit that parents really want to do together. They want us to work together to try and help this kid grow up to be a decent young person. And so it's not something that I think they're outsourcing to schools. They want to be involved in that. And I think that's where we can get our parents out of this adversarial habit that they have and back into we're working on this together, is to know what it is. As to all of our schools, we run a parent engagement session every year, because if we're going to invite them onto the same page, you've got to tell them what's on the page. This is what you can expect of us, and this is why. And they'll all go, oh, right, even if it's different to what they had when they went to school. Right, so this is why you're doing that.
Or even if it's not what they were expecting, at least they know. It's really clear.
Explain it to me. And they'll step out of this stuff because they didn't choose to be in conflict with the school. They were convinced by a really insidious media that they should be.
Yeah, I've seen that so many times. Okay, wow, so many things. My head's going to explode with all the ideas that you presented today. Thank you so much. It's really been a fascinating conversation. I feel like I don't know, is there something I'm missing? What else should we be thinking about in this conversation today?
I guess for me, one of the things that we've put a lot of work into is we believe that the best way that our kids can get a decent education is if our teachers are in their best possible state, and they're not. So we've done some work around teacher wellbeing, and helping teachers specifically to be able to focus on 5 domains that help them get activated in their wellbeing around their physical self, around their mindful self, around their learning self, their connected self, and their purposeful self. So I want teachers to know that there's little habits that they can install in each of those things that can actually help themselves, and that perhaps waiting for someone in the school who's got the wellbeing badge to do it for them is not working, and that we can do that. And I think the other thing that we need to collectively start talking about is what genuinely is impacting the wellbeing of our teachers, and particularly wellbeing of our teachers and school leaders. When we put that together, there's not a lot that's been done on putting that together. But when we do, we see 3 key themes emerging. One is around student behaviour. The thing that's keeping teachers up at night is still, and it's not so much that it happened that day, it's the absence of a plan that it could be any better tomorrow that keeps them up at night, and that impacts their wellbeing. Secondly, there's the issues around workload, and that we're asking teachers to do way too much, and we're asking them to do way too much outside their purpose for working with young people. And then the third one is issues with parents. And we have to, as schools, I think, and as school leaders, I think this is a call to arms to our school leaders, is to say, if we don't want to have issues with parents, shutting them out is not the way to get it done. Getting them back onto that same page, communicating our expertise, being really proud about the fact that we are just awesome at teaching and learning and that citizen building stuff that parents want to trust us with. That we can address that. We can get parents and schools out of this adversarial relationship. And I think if we can say this is a national imperative, for us to start talking about this stuff, that we can actually get some good work done.
Would that even include, I was just thinking, when I got my master's, no one said anything, like not at the school, that no one put it in the school newsletter. Congratulations, another teacher's like an expert in their field now. No one.
So you think about expert, and that's what we like to trust experts, but we don't project our expertise. We don't do it in our newsletters, which are often just reports of stuff we organised.
Yeah.
You go to a doctor's surgery, and you walk into that doctor's suite, and all their qualifications are up on the wall. There is a message that says this person that's about to walk in knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
We don't do that enough in education. We don't get up boldly, and because we kind of stand for everything, that we're supposed to. There are so many jobs that's involved in being a teacher these days. But if we said nope, all of that stuff, we'll do a little bit of that. Things that we are awesome at is the teaching and learning stuff. You want to know about teaching and learning, you listen to us. We had a great example, a school that we work with. We had an argument. It was a great argument about whether we should use the word pedagogy in the school newsletter.
Right.
And so the question was, will our parents know what we're talking about if we use that word? And I was able to throw the provocation back at them. Who would you go to if you wanted to know the meaning of pedagogy? You go to an expert.
Yeah.
Who are they? Us. Use the word. Let's start to talk about the things that we are amazing at that other people just can't do. And that's where the trust starts to come back.
Yeah, nice. So you touched before on something about there were 5 sort of pillars
of domains. We call them domains.
Okay.
Of teacher well-being.
Of teacher well-being. Can I ask you to expand on that a little bit? Because I feel like the audience who's listening to this are teachers who are considering moving out of education because they're broken, have had enough, they're exhausted, they're overwhelmed, and they're clutching at straws to find anything that will help them. Most of them want to stay and they want to do well. But if they're while they're on their way out, or if they do decide to stay, how do they flourish, or how do they thrive in the school?
So there's a really simple book on the Real Schools website called Tackling Teacher Wellbeing. Go and grab it. It's not a book you read, it's a book you write in, and respond to, in each of those 5 domains, 8 questions that can kind of get you activated in looking after your own wellbeing and your own state. One of them, for instance, in that physical self, is we ask teachers, how do you know? What are the signs that your batteries are running low? And we talk about teaching's taxing. Getting through a full day of teaching is, quite hard work. And it's not about saying you need to be able to do 10K on the treadmill or anything like that. But how do you know, for instance, when you're physically starting to battle, when the battery light's blinking, And talk about, for me, it's poor sleep. I know that I don't, even though I can go to bed tired, I'm not sleeping like I should. And the other is that I carry my stress in my jaw. So I'm a bit of a teeth grinder, and so if I notice those things, right, I need to attend to my physical well-being at the moment.
Yeah.
But we don't talk in schools enough about how do we know when our battery's low. We talk from a mindful self about, for instance, things like how could we be more, one of the things we know we need, and we've needed it over the course of the COVID pandemic, is our resilience. What builds resilience? It's often gratitude. So one of the questions in there is, what is it that you could be a whole lot more grateful for? We talk about connected self, which talks to relationships within schools and how often teacher stress can be triggered by a poor or a fractured relationship with a colleague. And so one of the questions in the book is, what's one really small thing that you could do to improve the most tested relationship that you have with a colleague?
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, but I've even presented this online, and a lot of the staff, I can see them writing things down, or they're putting things in the chat box.
Or are they going, I don't know about that.
Yeah, but it's even like whack a minty in their pigeonhole with a note that says, I was just thinking, I hope you enjoy this. Anything, it's got to be small, and achievable. And we talk about learning self, which is about the fact that as teachers, we want to make progress too. What are we getting better at? How are we invested in getting that thrill of making progress and getting better? And then we talk about purposeful self, which is what's our sphere of influence here? around being able to say, this is the stuff that matters. And this stuff that I'm spending a lot of time on at the moment, actually, no, it doesn't matter. I'm going to spend less time on that. You know, and so we feel that when teachers are activated themselves in that, that works better than if there's someone with a wellbeing badge in the school being responsible for everybody's wellbeing. Creates an unhelpful dynamic in that when people are starting to struggle, what they do is look at a school leader with that badge and say, well, you mustn't be doing your job. We need everyone collectively mobilised in this work, and it leaves the teacher with the school leader with the badge often in a really reactive position. So they'll see people are starting to struggle. What am I going to do? I'll whack a morning tea on, you know, and there's nothing wrong with hot chips. You know, I love them. You know, it's a lovely, nice thing to do, but it's not the reason that the people are struggling. The absence of hot chips isn't their problem. You know, it's often the challenge they've got is in one of those domains or more. We've got to get mobilised in that. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so that's so much, and I feel like this is no, it's great. It's a really meaty episode. I'm excited. I want to listen to it again, and we haven't even finished recording. So, Adam, before we wrap this up, I do want to say thank you so much for just being willing to share all these insights. I feel like we've had a little like a booster shot of well-being that's fabulous. Injected into this conversation, and thereby trickle out to schools all around the world as people listen in. Tell me, as we finish, just a question just for a bit of fun. What's your favorite song?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a song with a story. So I like it when there's a story in it. And I grew up in Frankston in Melbourne. So there's, for the Australians who'll understand this word, there's a bit of bogan in me. You know, so I always come back to bands like Cold Chisel. You know, and I think my favourite song would have to be, if I was sort of, you know, could only hear one for the rest of my life, it'd probably be Flame Trees.
I knew you were going to say that.
By Cold Chisel. I just love that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a beautiful song.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, thank you so much, Adam Voigt, for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today. It's been really interesting conversation. I'm very pleased to have been able to share it with you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises with your host, Elizabeth Diakos. Thanks for listening. If you need more support in your journey out of education, check out larksong.com.au and book a triage call. I'm a career transition coach for educators, and I support teachers in their journey out of education and into a life they love. I've been where you are now, and you don't need to do this alone.